Typically early for the start of his 12-hour shift in the soot-ridden boiler house, Norman makes his way through the gates of the Wapping hydraulic power station. As he approaches, mustering what little enthusiasm he can towards labouring at the crack of dawn, he bumps into his friend James, who works alongside him repairing the machinery. As the pair move closer towards the entrance, the rumbling and humming of the machinery grows louder, signalling the start of the working day. The machines sound lethargic, as if they too have just woken up from a night's rest and are unwillingly forced into action, a feeling replicated by the pair. Upon arrival inside, they are greeted with a chorus of productivity. The rumbles and hisses of the machinery reverberate within the weathered brick walls, the cracked texture of the brick holding in the scars of the station's monotonous grind to produce power. The green glazed tiling that lines the lower perimeter of the walls provides a visual plinth on which the scene of industry and production is set. Norman boils the kettle for himself and James's customary pre-work tea and makes his way to the boiler house. Once settled into the day, the pair feed off each other's energy as they excel at their craft. The camaraderie between the workers was the glue that held the green steel beams and weathered bricks together. For 27 years, the pair absorbed the routine and created rituals around the role that they slowly mastered. They were a part of the social glue that powered the beating heart of Wapping and had formed relationships that transcended the maintenance and repair of the boilers. But what's left today, Norman asks himself as he opens his garage door and gazes over towards the power station. The building seems to have somehow aged quicker than he has, forgotten by the side of the road. As he boils the kettle for himself and James, as he still does every morning at 6:10, he pulls the cover off a 1970s Honda motorbike engine that the two are painstakingly restoring. Looking forward to a morning of crafting and laughter together, he questions what, if anything, has changed in the years since the closing of the station. As James approaches with matched excitement towards the job at hand, Norman wonders how many other bonds like this must exist, tied to their industrial past and continued throughout their lives. He wonders why people fuss over the smelly boiler house and let weed grow up the accumulator tower. Why protect the empty shell of a building of labour and struggle, but not the social web that grew out of it? He wonders what happens to the connections lost with the sudden exodus of industry and the rituals and routines that are left behind. Heritage can be hard to define, with its meaning changing for different people and at different scales within the built environment and social landscape. English heritage defines it as all inherited resources which people value for reasons beyond mere utility, and the International Cultural Tourism Charter talks to the idea of the collective memory within heritage. However, English heritage only identified this lack of collective memory, also known as intangible heritage, within its present-day approach in February 2022. Why did it take them so long? Typically, heritage is seen as the tangible, which is physically seen and viewed. However, there is also the intangible, which is the lived heritage, formed of memories, experiences, feelings, and much more. For many assets, this tangible and intangible heritage exists in association with another. However, looking at contemporary buildings, you can see this is not carried through. The intangible is overlooked. There should be greater value placed upon the intangible throughout the built environment to ensure its protection and representation. The UK follows this trend, with a large focus being placed on the tangible over the intangible. We only have surface-level pride in our assets, failing to preserve traditions and skills. This is seen in legislation and policy too, where intangible is mentioned but not definitively acted upon, restricting the ability of projects to engage with the lived heritage of the asset. For example, the viewing corridors of St Paul's are a prime example of protection to the tangible heritage only. When looking worldwide, you can see that there is greater emphasis on the intangible. In Japan, they have a key focus on traditional craftsmanship, which is passed down through generations. It is the shared experience and adaptation of skills that defines its value, not just the physical craft. This focus on the intangible is a more sustainable way to value heritage, as it preserves the social web as well as the physical form. The split between tangible and intangible can also be seen through the split people give to living beings between body and soul. It creates the ability to go through multiple life cycles where the same soul transfers into a new physical form at the end of life. Heritage should be considered to follow similar principles. The tangible physical form can change or adapt at new stages of evolution, while the same or similar intangible soul remains present. These new life cycles of heritage can progress heritage assets into the future, instead of just deteriorating for preservation's sake. We must shift focus and assessment of value to the intangible and create life cycles of heritage to form new stories to ensure the success of assets into the future. Within UNESCO, there is an Intangible Heritage Cultural Forum where members are encouraged to enact programmes to safeguard intangible cultural heritage. However, the UK chose not to be a part of this forum. Protecting the UK's intangible cultural heritage should be considered to the same extent as the tangible is currently. Actions such as joining the ICHF are needed to change this mindset to a more balanced view, considering both aspects of heritage. The Making Good project looks to tell the story of heritage assets through their intangible heritage. Storytelling can be told through 3 stages: conceptualise, assembly, and sharing. These can be further split into 2 stages of making and sharing. These identify how within a heritage asset, a story is created then shared through the same physical and non-physical space. This creates both tangible and intangible significance that must be maintained but representative of future changes too, in an ever-adaptive flux of making and sharing. A system of change is required where intangible heritage is regarded as an equal to the tangible. So here's our case for change. Heritage is storytelling. Our perception of what we have in heritage has become disconnected from its roots. We must reconnect with and continue our lived heritage to make good with what we have while adapting to the future. To test the Making Good proposal, we're going to look at Tower Hamlets, one of the most multicultural boroughs in London, with an extremely high Bangladeshi population. Within the borough sits St Catherine's and Wapping, which juxtaposingly is one of the least multicultural areas in London. Our specific intervention site is the Shadwell Basin within Wapping. It has always been in constant evolution, providing lots of intangible heritage stories to engage with. First, zooming back out to the Thames, one of the first identifiable uses of the East of London was as a dock network. The London dock was constructed first and specialised in tobacco and wool. The West India dock was next and focused on coffee, sugar and rum from the West Indies, and then the East India dock specialised in higher value goods such as silk, spices and tea from the East Indies. Then came the Surrey commercial dock. They specialised in timber and had special storage for cheese. The Royal docks were constructed last. It had a connection to a railway, so it did not require storage, and focused on refrigerated goods, fruit, coal and oil. The Shadwell Basin within this sits at the London docks. It was created in 1832, but by the start of the 20th century, the docks had become outdated, so the London dock complex closed in 1969. The hydraulic power station on the basin outlived the docks for a little, remaining functional from 1893 to 1977. At its prime, the power fed a large proportion of the City of London's homes, hotels and theatres, expanding to a 10-kilometre radius. The Thames Clipper provides the modern-day connection, but misses Wapping. A key opportunity here would be to connect Wapping back up to the Thames via a transport network, tracing the route of the former dock network. With this, a redefining of the dock network is created, where each dock has its own identity, creating a new future for the stories of the docks told, once again, via the Thames. Picking out the Shadwell Basin, it will become the Maker Basin, due to its former use in the production of energy and goods. To identify the stories of Wapping today, we asked market traders at the Shadwell Basin what they thought the soul of Wapping was.
Such as Wapping is an incredible place because it's got the history, it's by the Thames, and it's got nice people, and it's got a community feel to it. That is the beauty of Wapping, it's undiscovered, and people haven't heard of it from even Londoners, unless they're within the East End. You have to explain Wapping is between Tower Bridge and Canary Wharf. But the positiveness is because it's relatively unknown, it's kept it quite fun, friendly, local, so there are benefits.
Matching these thoughts from people at the market to the demographic around the area, we identified key categories of lived heritage within Wapping. These were dance, drama, music, film, food, craft and growing, which are also derived from the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage Table. These categories can then be split into the 2 acts of storytelling. For the Maker Basin, there will be a focus upon the act of making through craft, due to the active link the basin's lived heritage has within the hydraulic power station and the dock network. This focus on the act of making will be seen through interventions within the hydraulic power station and new construction on the peninsula. The first key move to make this happen is to open up the basin back to the Thames, and then through the removal of the Wapping Wall boundaries and the 90s extension between the 2 buildings of the power station. Then we are opening up the arches and removing the ground floor level in the engine room to highlight the height of the plinths holding up the machinery. Next, we are opening the accumulator tower to the sky and ground, letting both light and water run through. Water will also run through the entire site, and the existing reservoir will be opened up and a skylight created within the edges of the existing railway track on the ground. Next, the form of the gap between the power station buildings will be extended to the peninsula to form public space where the former market will sit. An exchange space is formed at the front of the peninsula as a space for sharing of stories for the community. A boat maintenance workshop is added at the end of the basin, hanging over the water as part of the new transport network. And finally, a boat station has been added within the water, connected back to the peninsula via a walkway. On approach to the power station, now that the Wapping Wall has been removed, you are greeted with the Grade 2 listed building and a minimally landscaped public realm. There are water channels connecting back to the basin, sitting within a soft cobbled street boundary that also extends into the peninsula. Within the engine house, as the first experience of the old, sits an archive room for embrace of the building's past heritage and future progression through the immersive experiences that extend into the reservoir underground. In the boiler house is a timber workshop which engages with storytelling through the act of craft and making by providing spaces for the community to engage in classes around working with timber or rent a desk for themselves. The work produced in this space can be sold within the existing market. Cutting through the peninsula highlights how stories are being told through different means. The adaptable market stalls, sheltered community space within the exchange, the boat maintenance hub and the station all provide a place to share the creative crafts that have been produced on and off site. These crafts are traded, exhibited and made within these spaces at an intimate scale. The pumping station contentedly watches on to the activity of the peninsula, proud of its humble beginnings. Taking a section through both the existing and the new, it is shown that the existing power station holds the main spaces for making, and then the stories of this process are told within the activity on the peninsula. The orientation of the pumping station creates a defined outdoor space on the peninsula that has the ability to hold the already successful weekend market at the basin. There is also a sunken platform that sits with the ability to act as a place for sharing of stories, crafts, or simply a place to exchange ideas or hold events. Looking at the archive in the engine house, you can see a story of how it was once the pumping heart that allowed for the production of energy. Today, the vast masonry shell preserves the engine relics as they sit quietly on their humble plinths. By removing the floor slab between the concrete plinths, suddenly, the seasoned engines become a celebrated triumph of engineering within the space, raised into the air. Walking over the coals on the raised steel grid flooring in the reservoir amongst the rumbling pipeworks provides a sensory experience and glimpse into the everyday lives of the workers at the pumping station. Back in the main engine room, the concrete plinths are carved into, creating nooks and exhibits for people to interact with and learn more about what once happened here. Moving through the space at different levels using the rusted steel walkway and staircase gives opportunity to soak in the rich materiality of which itself speaks volumes of its past. In the accumulator tower, water from the Shadwell Basin runs underneath a walkway. At midday, the sun floods through the open roof and catches the water's attention to ask it to dance on the weathered brick walls which once housed the ballast that produced the energy. This is a place of reflection and allows time to absorb both the past and new stories of the engine house. Running above the reservoir sits an existing coal rail track which has been opened up and infilled with a glass skylight to allow natural light into the 6-metre void of the former water store. The space now stores material waste collected from construction sites to be used in the timber workshop in the boiler house. In the water tanks above, sitting on the boiler house roof, further workshops are housed with access to the existing chimney outside. During an annual making day, the chimney becomes a magnet, drawing artists, students, craftsmen and the community together to get involved in rebuilding the chimney to its original height of 42 metres. Bringing people together for the day creates an opportunity to share skills, ideas and embody the intangible heritage into a physical form. Sarah has left her commute down to the last minute as usual. The punctuality of water travel has become somewhat a dependence of her modern routine. As she approaches the boat station, she looks at the old hydraulic power station that her granddad Norman had so often told her about. She can hear the clattering below her feet as reclaimed materials are selected for reuse, signalling the start of the working day. On arrival inside, she feels like she has entered a shrine to an industrial past. The cracked texture of the brick holds in the scars of a station's monotonous grind to produce power. The green glazed tiling that lines the lower perimeter of the walls provides a visual plinth on which the scene of curiosity and learning is set. As she moves into the old boiler house, she is greeted by an overwhelming sense of craftsmanship as the public spills in for its Saturday craft market. Traders and visitors collaborate to make good of reclaimed materials, trading skills and goods underneath the light beaming in from the arches above. Sarah realises that she is now late for work and rushes over to the peninsula to board her boat to the cultivation basin in Rotherhithe. As she crosses over to the peninsula, the smell of fresh coffee and pastries from the market grows stronger until she arrives at the exchange, where she peeks into a dance class that is taking place. Before joining the floating path to the dock, she glances into the maintenance workshop where a boat is being patched up before embarking down the gangway to board her boat to work. Standing on the floating deck for a few minutes gives Sarah some time to be simply still. As if someone had pressed pause on the rush of her morning commute, she gazes across the basin and watches the water bob slowly up and down, reflecting on the overhanging roof. As she departs from the station to exit the basin, she looks across the market, which she has just travelled through, towards the old hydraulic power station. She watches friends on either side share moments together in between buildings, a moment of tranquility within a hive of making and sharing. Captivated by what it is today, she can't help but wonder what this place must have been like for her granddad so many years ago. She leaves feeling inspired by the craftsmanship, connected to the water, and more importantly, connected to her granddad Norman.